It's the Introvert Dating Success Podcast, the show for introverted men that's all about learning how to attract beautiful women and still get your precious alone time. And now, here's your host, dating coach and fellow introvert, Harry Wilmington.
What up, IDS Mob? Welcome to the Introvert Dating Success Show. I'm your host, as always, Harry Wilmington. And today's show, man, do we have a doozy of a question to answer. So I tell you guys all the time, if you want me to answer your question on the show, either write to me at harrywilmington@gmail.com or leave a comment under one of my videos. And as of late, I've been getting a lot of people leaving comments under my videos, and I appreciate it. So when you do that, though, I'm going to want details about your situation so that way I can answer it in the best way possible. So today's question, a guy actually left a comment on one of my videos. And when he did, I wrote him back and said, hey, I need more clarity and context for being able to answer your question. At which point he sent me a very long email that helped me further figure out what I'm going to talk about. But today in particular, we're going to be talking about what to do when your woman has an issue with you watching adult movies, aka PORN. I'm saying adult movies because the YouTube algorithm might get mad at me if I say PORN too much. So we're going to say adult movies. But he had a question concerning a woman he's dating, and they keep on like going through the cycle of breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together. And a big part of this is because he has a problem watching adult movies, amongst many other things that we're going to be talking about in this message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through his question. And as I'm reading through it, because it is a long message, I'm going to stop and start to give my opinion on certain things, because he has a lot of things outside of the watching adult movies issue. There are a lot of things that both of them are doing in the course of their on again, off again relationship that's really causing it to be that kind of roller coaster. And I think some of it is stuff that he's doing. I think a lot of it's stuff that she's doing, and we need to kind of go over that stuff. So those of you listening to this program will kind of know the ins and outs of what you should or should not be doing when you're dating a woman, and also how to avoid this constant breakup and get back together cycle, because it's not very healthy to have. Okay. So let's go ahead and get into this guy's question. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read the initial comment he left. I'm gonna read that all the way through, and then I'm gonna get into the bigger part of his message that he sent. So his initial comment said this. Oh, and he left this on the video I did about having sex with your, saying my ex had sex during our breakup, which has been a very popular video as of late, because that's a big issue a lot of guys deal with, where they break up with the girl, and then when they get back together, they found out that she hooked up with somebody and they don't know how to feel about it. And so I've done a couple of videos about that topic in particular. So this guy commented and he said, what if you guys got into a fight that lasted kind of a week, but in the end, she said she couldn't be with me over something that she believes is true, but isn't. We have had breaks before and never done anything. She slept with a man in her friend group over that weekend. And when we finally had a face-to-face talk, she told me. She also said that was to end the relationship because it has been toxic, and thought that that would be the final straw, while also saying he meant nothing to her and it was a bad experience that she deeply regretted. Is it something closer to cheating or closer to mess up during a break? Also, if I did the same over the break, she would be also devastated and less likely to forgive due to her massive jealousy issues. I love her and don't want to move on, but not sure I can forgive this because it feels like a betrayal. Am I being a simp for even considering trying to forgive her? All right. So I like this question, but I was like, you know what? I don't know enough about what's going on to give an answer that's going to be very helpful. So I wrote him and I said, hey, I'd love to reply to this in a video, but I need more context. What was the thing she believed was true but wasn't? And also, how many breaks have you two taken and what usually caused them? Again, I like to know the scope of what's going on so I can get more insight, because as guys, we'll give the thing of like, oh, this woman really hurt me and, you know, I don't know what to do and should I take her back? But that doesn't really give the full context of like what was actually going on. What were things that she was doing, but also realistically, what were things that you were doing? I don't believe in any relationship that one person is usually at fault. I always believe that there's two people there. So as much as we want to be the heroes in our own story, you have to recognize that you have to tell the full story of it. And sometimes that could mean telling parts that don't make you look the most favorable, but it does give a balance to the whole story of what's going on. So here's his full message, and I'll be stopping and starting along the way. So he says, okay, first I'd answer, we originally broke up last summer because I was watching adult movies behind her back and she views that as cheating. I apologized and said I would never again do that while we were together. Okay. So we have a few things going on here. For one, we clearly have a clash of ideals because as we go through the message, you'll see this woman has a major issue with him watching adult movies in general. Okay. Now, this is a thing that some women have, and some people have in general. Some people have a major problem with adult movies. They see them as, sinful, immoral, or they just view it as, if you're in a relationship with me, why would you need to go to some other source to be able to get your rocks off? I consider that cheating. Other people don't care. In fact, I'd say the majority of women that I have dated not only watch adult movies, but usually want me to watch adult movies with them to get both of us in a better mood to want to do some exciting things in the bedroom. Okay. So this is not a show that judges based on morality. This is a show that is going to tell you that if the woman you're dating has ideals about adult movies that clash with your ideals, then that needs to be a conversation, because you might not have an issue with it. You might be a guy that's just is like, hey, you know what? When you're not around, or you go out of town, or you're hanging with your friends, and I'm feeling like I need to, have a release of some kind, this is the source that I go to do that. She might feel, but I should be your only source. Why can't you hold out when I'm not there? And this makes me feel a certain kind of way. That needs to be a conversation where both people are heard. And at the end of the day, neither person is necessarily wrong, but realistically in our society, because there are such differing views about that, that could be a thing that greatly affects your relationship. If you're a guy that doesn't see a problem with wanting to watch adult movies ever so often, and she has a problem with it, that could be a thing. That could be a deal breaker. Okay. But here's what you don't want to do in this situation, regardless. You never want to promise that you're going to do something that you clearly don't want to do just to please your woman, because that's going to be worse if you promise a thing and then you break it later. So the biggest mistake this guy made thus far in this message is trying to apologize for watching adult movies, because it's nothing to, if it's something that you like to do, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It'd be different if you were like saying to her, hey, I recognize I had this adult movies problem and I really am trying to quit. Oh, please help me quit. Then you can be apologetic and say, hey, I'm actually trying to quit this, but I don't know how to. I need your help. But if it's something that you don't see a problem with and you're not trying to quit it and you don't actively see yourself really wanting to give it up, then that you don't apologize for. And this is for anything. You could be into smoking marijuana. You could be into doing other things that to her, she might not see as healthy. And those things, again, are debatable, but you don't make the promise of saying you're not going to do it just to please her, because it's not going to please her down the line if you end up breaking that promise. On top of, again, you don't actually mean it. And you don't actually feel bad for watching the adult movies. So that's a thing where, again, you can say, hey, I want to watch them and you don't want me to watch them. What's the compromise here? Maybe I only watch them during that time of the month, or maybe I only watch them when you're out of town. Or we can just agree, hey, you know what? I won't flaunt in front of your face that I watch these things. So that means if, I'm going to let you use my computer, I'll make sure that I scrub all my search history before you watch it. I'll make sure I don't have any things popping up on my phone or on my computer that are of movies or of nude ladies or whatever, because obviously this is the thing that bugs you. And I don't want to have to push in your face that I'm doing it, but I'm not going to stop. I don't want you to think I'm going to stop, but I can figure out ways to not have it be so forefront to you. Okay. Because I'm trying to figure out how this woman even came to know he was watching it in the first place. Like, was she on his computer and something popped up? Did he say, hey, by the way, I like to watch adult movies? Like, I think those are things where you don't necessarily have to talk about them. That doesn't mean you're hiding it from your partner, but they don't need to be coming up in everyday conversation either, So yeah, that's the first part of this message. Continuing. So he said he apologized and he would never do that again. He says, we stayed together and got official over the next. So that means that she was putting this ultimatum out, or this thing saying that she didn't like him watching adult movies before they were actually boyfriend and girlfriend. This is the point where, if this is just the dating phase of things, this is where you start negotiating what's going to work and not work for you in a relationship. So he already knew going into a potential relationship that she wasn't going to be happy with him watching adult movies. I would have broken it off at that point. Like, again, I don't think you should necessarily be breaking up over, like, you shouldn't be choosing adult movies over a relationship, but you should also not be taking ultimatums from somebody saying, well, you should never watch them. And if you do watch them and blah, blah, blah. Like, again, she's already showing before the relationship that you watching adult movies is going to be an issue. If you have that conversation and still decide to get into the relationship, that's on you now. So I wouldn't have even agreed to the relationship at that point. But continuing on, we stayed together and got official over the next 3 to 4 months, and I watched 0 adult movies in that time. We have broken up several times, but most were not as real feelings and just fights. Okay. So it sounds like this. It sounds like every time there tends to be a major fight or blowout, you guys break up. And I'm still getting familiar with the whole attachment detachment theory and the way people fight. And, a lot of men in particular, since we don't, not that women like to have fights, but they are typically more emotionally equipped to deal with high intensity fights. But I found men in general, because we typically like things to be even keel and peaceful, it can be very hard to get used to the idea of how intense a fight gets and what that fight means for the relationship, and figuring, well, if we're having a fight, this must mean that we're not meant to be together. I'm going to break it off. And that's the thing that, I've struggled with. I have been very much an avoidant person where, in the past, if fights are getting too intense or they're getting too frequent, my brain just goes to, well, clearly this must mean we're not meant to be together. I'm out. Or, well, maybe I need to give this person a break so they can see that it's better that we don't fight than fight. So I'm out. And that is not a healthy way to deal with fights, because realistically, if a fight's coming up, it means that there is something going on in the relationship that is not pleasing to one person or the other, and it needs to be talked about. But even with that, you have to realize that, like, not every single thing that's a disagreement needs to result in a blowout, knockout, drag out, intense fight. If that's something that's happening, then that means that you need to work on being able to be less, what's the word I'm looking for? You need to be less attached to the outcome of these various things, and you need to be more indifferent to things in general. Like, if and there's stuff I'm going to point to later on in this message that kind of speaks to that. But like, if she's doing a certain thing here or there that's bugging you or is hurting your feelings, that shouldn't always result in a huge intense fight. But if it is, that means you need to learn how to better regulate your emotions and to better regulate the things that you are letting bug you. Okay, as the guy, women are going to be looking to you to lead the relationship. And so if fights are constantly starting, more often than not, it means that you're allowing that to happen, and you can't let that happen. Okay. So you have to figure out what it is about your interaction and what things are consistently triggering you that are making fights happen. Because we could put all the blame on her. She's too intense. This is that. But there are things that are clearly triggers for you that maybe she's not aware of, or maybe that you're not aware of, are triggers that shouldn't be, that are things that shouldn't be as triggering, that you need to work on so you won't be having these fights. And you can tell by, if you keep getting into relationships with women, and in each of these relationships, you're constantly getting into fights, it's not all just the women. There's the portions of this where it is you, and you need to figure out what it is, whether it's, the way that maybe you saw your parents dealing with each other in the past, or, various fights you got into in the past that made you feel that you had to protect yourself constantly, that are causing you to constantly be in these relationships that result in fights. Okay. Just something to consider. Anyway, continuing. So during the breakups, he says, I would watch adult movies when we broke up, and that would hurt her, but I thought we were over and it didn't matter anymore. Okay. So during a breakup, you can do whatever the heck you want. When you get back together with the woman, there is no need to tell her the various women that you hooked up with or what you did to relieve yourself during that break. So I can only imagine how these get backs are going. Hey, let's get back together. Oh, by the way, while we were broken up, oh my God, I watched so many adult movies. Why does she need to know that? Why are you telling her that information? That's something that is not for any of her business, honestly. And so you don't need to be bringing that up to her when you get back together. Plain and simple. Continuing. He says, over the past year, I would say there have been 4 to 5 bigger fights leading into, at the time, seemingly permanent breakups. They would be her choosing to go out with her friends instead of me. And then in parentheses, he says, I just wanted us to go out together, or us fighting and it exploding when drinking. Those have been the times I've broken up with her. Okay. So now it's sounding like you're a little too attached to her, because here's the thing. in a relationship, yes, you're going to be spending a good portion of your time together. That said, she, just like you, she had a life outside of you before you guys got together. This also means that she had friends that she hung out with, oftentimes without you because you weren't there before you got together. I do not believe that just because you get into a relationship with somebody means that now every time either you or her want to hang out with friends, that the other person has to tag along. Because it'd be like if you said, hey, I'm going to be having a hangout with the guys a little bit later, and she got mad at you every time you wanted to hang out with 3 or 4 other guys, and she did, and you weren't trying to bring her along. That's a drag. So if she has other women friends that she wants to hang out with, understand, men amongst other men have their own dynamic, just like women amongst themselves have their own dynamic. And the nice thing about being able to hang out with same-sex friends without your mate there is that a lot of things can be said or understood that are unspoken that people just get. Like women hanging out with women, they can say things or talk about things without having to go into full detail because other women will just get it. Much in the same way that when men hang out, we can say things and talk about things without having to add a whole lot of context for the other men there because just as men know that. So you got to think about if she's trying to hang out with her girlfriends and she brings you along, that now makes an awkward situation for the group because they might want to talk about women things or just be able to have the dynamic of being around other women, and you being added to that pool now changes up that dynamic and makes it awkward for her. So yes, even in a relationship, there might be times where she wants to go hang out with her best girlfriends without you being there. You cannot get jealous of that. I mean, you can do whatever you want. You can get jealous of it, but it's not healthy for the relationship for you to get jealous when she wants to hang out with other women friends. If she was going to hang out with other male friends, I mean, I could see how that would be a different issue. But her trying to just hang out with female friends of hers and you getting jealous about that, or you want to go hang out, that's not fair to her. Okay. So you breaking up with her on account of that, that's not fair. Now, if you're trying to invite her out, say like 10 times, and 7 of those times she's like, I want to go hang with my friends, that's when there's an issue going on. But if you ask her out 10 times and 2 of those times she's like, oh, me and my friends are hanging out, you can't come, that's a pretty fair ratio, actually. That's not something you should be bothered by. That just means that you have something going on with you internally that's making you feel like this is a problem, and it's really not a problem. Okay. In terms of you breaking up with her for you guys are fighting and exploding when drinking, this is why I'm really not. I mean, I don't really drink that much in general. I rarely drink, but part of that's because I recognize, I have alcoholism that runs in my family. And the times that I do drink, I can feel myself getting more tired and crankier. So as a general rule, if I'm with somebody, like say I go on a date with a woman and she wants to have a drink or whatever, I know that if I take a drink that night, there's a good chance that I'm probably going to either need to not go home with her, or I need to like go home with her, hook up, whatever, and then go home to my place and have time to myself, because it takes me about 12 hours to get over that feeling of crankiness or moodiness when I drink. Okay. So you cannot be trying to have rational conversations with somebody when you're drinking, because chances are this is what's going to happen. And so I'd recommend, honestly, just for everybody in general, to cut back on drinking. Like, aside from adding calories to you, it really is, it's a depressant. And so with the depressant, it's going to make you moodier. It's going to make you see things in a different light that shouldn't be there. It's going to make any kind of criticisms towards you feel more intense, and it's going to result in having these exploding fights. Okay. And again, we're trying to break the cycle of you breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together. So if you find that a catalyst for you breaking up is that you drink and then you want to have a conversation and it results in fights, then what it means is A, you shouldn't be fighting when drinking, which means B, you need to recognize that when you're drinking, if you start feeling those feelings come on, you need to say, hey, you know what? I recognize that I drank earlier and this conversation is not going to go well because I just drank. So let's talk about this at a different time. Okay. But you need to stop. I wouldn't say stop the drinking, but I would say stop thinking you can have rational conversations after you've drunk. You clearly cannot. Okay. Continuing. He says, she has broken up with me over what she thinks I'm into for my adult movie history. He says, particularly, she thinks I'm into incest and teens because of step something title or teen titles. So for those of you that maybe not be into adult movies, a lot of adult movie plots deal with stepfather getting with the stepdaughter, stepmother getting with the stepson, or in the case of, not straight porn, stepmothers and stepdaughters getting together, or stepfathers, the point. So, and they do that in adult movies because they recognize that, making movies where it's like, oh, an actual real life mom and son or father and daughter will not be like looked upon favorably in the public. But technically speaking, step whatevers, if they hook up, they're not really related. So therefore, it's in the eyes of the adult industry perfectly fine. That said, people can still look at that and say that because it feels like incest. And the reason, particularly with women having that viewpoint, is because think about this, okay? Women can be friends with a guy and can realistically say they never want to hook up with that guy because they view him like a brother. And that feeling, it feels so much like an actual family member to them that they cannot personally see themselves as being able to ever hook up with that guy. This is why, guys, if you're in the friend zone and you have a woman say, oh, you feel like a brother to me, you have no shot, because you legitimately to her have the same feeling as a blood relative. And that therefore cancels you out in her mind at being able to hook up with her. Okay. So therefore, you might have a woman out there that sees these adult movies you're watching where it's like, oh, step brother and stepson and stepmom or whatever, and think to herself, oh my God, that's just like real family. That feels like a real family. Therefore, that feels like incest to me. Okay. And that doesn't make her viewpoint right. I'm just saying this is how it's being justified. Okay. So understand that it's not even necessarily about that. It really is about the fact that she doesn't like the idea of you watching adult movies altogether. Obviously, if it's, this whole step thing or whatever, teen thing or whatever, that, you could try to explain to her rationally, well, they're both actresses and actors. And so it's not really a thing that they're really related. And then even with the teen stuff, most of those women are actually in their 20s. They just happen to look a little younger, but they're really in their 20s. So technically, it doesn't matter the logic of what you're watching. What matters is she feels that it's wrong, therefore it is wrong, which goes back to the issue of if she therefore has an issue with that and it's not an issue for you, this very well could be a deal breaker, okay? But knowing that, you cannot take her viewpoint and then try to think you can like change her mind and then be mad at her for not changing her mind about the fact that you have a different viewpoint of these adult movies than she does. This could just very well be a clash of ideals and morality and whatever. And that could very well mean that it's not going to work out because this is an issue for her and it's not an issue for you. Continuing, he says, among other issues in our past that she hasn't healed from or her jealousy issues. The reason I put this in the email is because she has past trauma. And because of that, she believes those things about me are true or fears them so much that she at times of anger convinces herself they are true. Well, recognize that her past issues are hers to deal with, but they do affect you in the relationship. So if you know what these past issues are, is she actively working on these issues? If not, then that means that they're going to constantly be issues for you in the relationship, and they might not be things you want to deal with. If they're not, it very well may mean that this is not the woman for you, and you might need to break it off permanently. Continuing, he says, this past time we broke up before the events above, I gave her an ultimatum to come to Mardi Gras with me and my friends after she got off work. And then after we would meet up with her friends and go to a rave later that night. She ended up meeting up with her friends at Mardi Gras and instead of me, and that made me end it. So here's the thing. Ultimatums rarely ever work. And the more you try to force somebody to do something or say they have to do it, it makes them feel like their free will is getting taken away and ultimately can make them like rebel against you and not want to do the thing you want them to do. Okay. So yes, she should have wanted to hang out with you in this case, because it is a holiday. It's Mardi Gras. You all should be having fun together. But again, I don't think the ultimatum was the way to go. And the fact that she ended up doing the thing without you and just went on her own, yes, that was a justified enough reason to end it. But if you feel in your heart as though you were going to use that as a means to try to get back at her, knowing full well you're going to want her back later, then there were different ways to go about it. You could have like talk to her after and say, hey, so just, this really hurt me. I want to know why this went on or what's going on. What made you feel as though you could go to this thing without me versus just, going with me and my friends? Was it the ultimatum thing? Was there a different way I could have handled that? Like, what's going on? Okay. But ultimately, ultimatums do not typically work. All right. Continuing. He says, we went 2 weeks talking, 2 weeks, no talking and being done. Probably the longest time or breakup we've had. And by the way, this is why I say, I'm gonna do a whole show about this, about breaks are really breakups. Okay. You cannot assume that I'm going to break up with this person, but they'll be there 2 weeks later. Like, you cannot go into a break assuming that's going to happen, because if you're saying, well, that's it, we're through, that other person might take that as gospel and assume, you know what? He said we're through, so that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and start seeing other people. And you might be thinking, well, if I break up with her now, she'll be devastated and it'll actually realistically take her like more than a few months to get over me. So if I break up with her now, I can come back 2 weeks later and she'll still be so obsessed with me that I can get back with her. And that is not always true. I know for me, if I've had it where I've been broken up with and I've gotten to the point where, because I don't take breakups really personally, I just take it as, okay, that other person just didn't view that I was a fit. I can still be hurt by the breakup, but be able to realistically start moving on and trying to see other people within a short amount of time. And so she could very well be the same way, where after like 3 or 4 of these breaks, she could be like, this could be the one. This could be the break that actually is the breakup. So let me go ahead and just start searching out, because we've gone through this before and I'm tired of these breakups and he seems like he really means it. So as much as I'm hurt, there's a guy over there that is interested. Why not give him a shot? You never know if that's going to happen or not. So that's why I say you can't be teasing. You can't be trying to get your way by having these constant breakups, because it could be that one time where it doesn't go your way and you're going to be pissed off about it. Continuing, he says, I went to NY for a family funeral, and when I was back in town, I went to see her the following Sunday. We agreed to start fresh, but in being honest, I told her I talked to my ex from like 6 or 7 years ago to get advice. That pretty much ruined the restart, but I was just trying to be fully honest with her. Okay, guy. Once again, when you are broken up, and I've said this in previous shows, unless you got a girl pregnant or got an STD of some kind, anything you do during that break period where she was not in your life is none of her business, including who you hooked up with and who you decided to have a conversation with. And so many guys fall for this thing of like, I got to be 100% honest. I got to tell her every single thing. No, you don't. Like, especially if you're broken up. If you're broken up, she does not need to know about everybody you were talking to or connecting with during the course of that break. So especially you going to talk to an ex-girlfriend, again, why does she need to know that? Now you're falling for the trick that the media has taught us, and the media has been responsible for lying to so many guys about being honest about every single thing in their life. So this whole thing of like, you see on TV shows, hey babe, so even though we're back together, I gotta be honest, like, I talked to this girl during the break, or I kissed this girl this one time during the break, but it meant nothing, and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's what they've taught us that we need to do. And I'm telling you, you don't need to be honest or open up about every single thing that happened when you guys were on a break. Again, that's none of her business. You are free to do whatever you wanted to do during that time frame. And if you decided to get back together, that's great. And I believe that for women, I believe that, if she had gone to talk to an ex-boyfriend during that time, that's none of your business. Because ultimately, again, you guys are deciding to start fresh, which means that now anything you guys do during the break doesn't matter. You guys decided in the course of that break that you both wanted each other back, and that you guys are more important to each other than whoever else you were talking to. That's all that matters. All right. So stop falling for this. I got to be honest about every single thing I did during the break. BS. It's not a thing. You ain't got to do it. Continuing. He says, let's see. We did vastly improve our argument habits following some argument rules. I like that. I like the fact I believe couples should always have a set of rules to follow during arguments, whether it's like, hey, we're going to not interrupt each other. We're going to listen to each other fully. We're going to repeat back to each other what the other person said. We're going to try to really listen and try to understand the other person's viewpoint. And then we're going to try to come to some kind of compromise or conclusion about how we're going to handle this. We're not going to raise our voices. We're not going to call each other out of our names. These are things that need to be there, because in order to really have an effective argument, like an argument is ultimately just saying, hey, we have some disagreements on some things and they clearly need to be talked about and worked out and discussed. How can we best do that? And so I think that's actually a healthy thing, because couples that don't do that are just going into an argument thinking my goal is to try to defend my position and this person's going to try to attack me, so I got to protect myself. And I think realistically, if you guys are trying to love and care for each other, then an argument is simply saying, hey, these are things that we were not aware are issues for us, but I'm coming to you because I love and care for you. And so I'm going to point these things out because I want our relationship to be better. And so I try to go into all arguments, even if the other person has to tell me stuff that I don't want to hear. My thoughts always, but they're coming to me because they love me and they care for me. And so this isn't meant to be an attack. It's meant to be, if anything, a sign that, hey, because I care for you, I don't want these issues breaking us up, so let's talk about them, okay? So you want to have rules for your arguments so you can best have a conversation to be able to fix these things. So he says, she, I think, had a foot out the door and started breaking rules of our argument thing, like name calling and stonewalling. Her go-to is to run from her problems. And yes, this is a thing that a lot of people do. Again, I've had problems with stonewalling where it's like, we're talking about an issue and then my feelings get hurt. And I'm like, well, I don't want to talk about this anymore. And that's one of those things where you have to learn how to build a thick skin and learn to recognize the difference between criticism and full-on attack, because criticism is not bad. Criticism is saying, you might not be aware there are these things that you do that are causing harm to the relationship, and I want to talk about them. That's not a bad thing. A person that's constantly saying, you're always at fault, this and that, that's attacking. And that's a hard thing to not stonewall against. But even within that, you got to be better at being able to say, hey, you know what? Like, let's turn the ship around. You're saying these things, but like, I want to get to the root of the problem versus trying to run from it. So we can have a rational conversation about it, but recognize, again, two people at play here. So both people have to get better at not stonewalling, but the person that's getting stonewalled against also has to get better at being able to present their argument or their disagreement in a way that's not going to bring too much intensity or push that other person away. Okay. Continuing. He says, I didn't chase in our last fight and let her have time. Little over half a week later, she reaches out to apologize for how she talked about sensitive topics. I said, okay, but I wanted her to come do it in person. Friday, she was going to stop by after work. I was at my parents' dropping my father off because he hurt his leg. I said, can you wait 15 to 20 minutes? And she said no and went home to do homework. So let me get this straight. You agreed that you wanted to talk about this thing and something happened with your dad, which is understandable. If he's got a hurt leg, you got to be there to help him out. And she couldn't wait an additional 15 to 20 minutes for you to get home or get to where you guys were going to meet to talk about it. At that point, it's over. Like, she's not willing to really stay there and actually talk about stuff. That means she's pretty much over it. And at that point, it's done. It's a done deal. You should have just been like, you know what? That's fine. Hey, you can't wait for me. This clearly isn't important to you. And so I'm recognizing that on both our sides, we have things we need to work on, but this isn't a healthy dynamic. And sometimes you as the guy have to recognize when a dynamic is not healthy enough to continue going forward. And that's hard for a lot of guys, especially guys that, haven't had a lot of relationships or aren't used to breaking up with women. Then it can seem like, but I have a woman. Like, I want to hold on to this because I have a woman. I might not get another woman. And so I got to do everything I can to try to make this particular relationship work. No, you don't. Like, if you've had enough, you've been breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together. This is not a healthy dynamic. And so what that could mean is that you or her might have things you need to work on, or it could mean that you and her just don't have enough stuff lined up to where this is going to be a viable relationship. And it's okay to recognize that as a thing and say, you know what, based on the fact that we keep breaking up with each other, based on the fact that we have different ideas about adult movies, based on the fact that you can't wait 15 minutes to talk about a serious issue that affects our relationship in person, this is not a good dynamic and I'm out. And it is what it is. And you could feel bad about it because you don't want to hurt her feelings, but as you date more people, you'll find that this is a thing that either sometimes you're going to be the person broken up with, or sometimes you're going to have to put on your big boy pants and do the breaking up. Either way, it's good to recognize when a dynamic is not healthy so you won't continue to try to feed into that negative relationship. Continuing, he says, while home, we snap texted and she said she couldn't be with someone into incest and someone she would be worried about having a kid with. Again, that goes through different ideas about adult movies. If she keeps bringing this up, it means that this is a major sticking point for her. It does not mean she's in the wrong. It just means that she has a different viewpoint about this than you do, and those things clash, and therefore this might not be good for a long-term relationship. Because again, You might find a partner out there that has no problem not only watching adult movies with you, but wants to film an adult movie with you in your own bedroom. Women out there are that. I did some research this morning about, I think 32% of women in this country like watch adult movies. And that's just the ones that admit to it. There are plenty more women that don't admit to watching adult movies, but it makes them look bad for some reason if they say that they like it also, so they don't say it. But all that to say, there are plenty of women out there that will have no problem with you watching adult movies or have no problem watching it with you. So if this is the thing that you don't mind doing and she does, you might want to consider that this isn't going to work out. He says, I explained the step stuff, whatever, are just titles, and I was there for the look of the actress. Not a good argument. And said, this is why it's a good thing I'm giving up adult movies to avoid going to places like this. Again, you're not trying to give up adult movies. You're attempting to give them up to please her, but it's not something you want to do. Now, if later in your life you decide, hey, you know what? I've seen reports, I've done research and realized why watching these adult movies is actually not good for me, so I'm going to stop of my own accord, then that's great. But you doing it just to appease her, it's never a good idea. Continuing, he says, she is really, really sensitive to all these topics and lashed out probably because they look like teens. And I responded with an F you, and she gave a very sarcastic, have a good one. Okay, so I will say this, regardless of whether you think you're in the right or in the wrong in an argument, you are now name calling. When you're saying, well, F you, blah, blah, you're basically like pushing her to the side and saying her opinion doesn't matter and she's stupid for having it. And so I tend to err on the side of do not use hyper intense language when you're trying to argue with somebody. You saying F you, screw you, you're nothing but a piece of S, yada, yada, yada. Do you think that makes the other person want to listen to you or open up to your side? It does not. And so this is as bad as name calling. You should do neither. You should not be name calling, and you should not be using hyper intense language when you're trying to have somebody see your point of view. Continuing, he says, on Saturday, I tried to call her after being at a baseball game and out at a bar with friends till 11 and 12. And by the way, notice you're out with friends till 11 or 12 without her, and you don't see that as an issue, but you're mad at her for trying to hang out with her friends. Like, don't be hypocritical in relationships either. Continuing, he says, she had me blocked on the phone, and when I called on Snap, she blocked me. All I wanted to do was see her and clear the air and make sure nothing stupid happened that night, which of course did. So again, this is one of those things where you have to be respectful of what the woman wants. You cannot be trying to force communication on her. So if you called her and she blocked you, the go-to move is not to say, okay, well, what other platforms can I reach her on? Maybe if I message her on Facebook or Instagram, maybe if I call her on Snapchat, maybe like she's clearly saying that she does not want to talk to you, which means she needs time. Does it mean that she'll never talk to you? Maybe it does. Maybe it does not. But it does mean that for this moment in time, you can't be trying to force yourself upon her. If she's giving signals that indicate she doesn't want to talk to you, this is not the time to try to talk to her. This is the time to lean back and let her come back to you. All right. Continuing, he says, every time we have been apart, neither of us ever even hinted or wanted to hook up with anyone else. That is why this one hurt and felt like a betrayal. It happened one day after she said we broke up. I viewed it as words of us about to be broken up, but we have yet to talk in person, and I wasn't convinced it was over with us that Saturday night and tried to talk with her on Sunday and couldn't reach her, and she come over to talk face-to-face Monday after work. That is when I asked, and she told me what happened. So rewinding back to the beginning of this long message, which was initially she came over and said that she slept with a man in her friend group over that weekend that they weren't talking. And when they finally had a face-to-face, she told him. And she also said that that was to end the relationship because it had been toxic. So all this goes back to, she viewed the relationship as toxic. And she felt that when he said F off, that it was truly over, at which point she had no problem hooking up with this guy. Do I feel as though he needed to know that information? I do not. The part where she says, she said it meant nothing to her and it was a bad experience that she deeply regretted, that's a lie. What's happening is, now that you're face-to-face with her, she's trying to save face herself by making you feel as though, oh, I hooked up with this guy, but oh, it was the worst hookup ever and it was a mistake. It was not. She had a darn good time, but she's not going to tell you that because that's really, she knows that telling you that she had a good time hooking up with another dude is not going to put her in your good graces. Okay. But trust, she had a good time. But ultimately, I would say this, I would say this isn't cheating at all. You guys were broken up for all intents and purposes. And so she could do whatever she wanted to do during a break. Do I think you all should get back together? Absolutely not. I think that there's been more than enough breakups and get back togethers to prove that you guys are clearly not stable. I think that there are some things on your end that are causing you to constantly get triggered that aren't well. I think that there's probably deep-rooted issues that she's going through or that she's experienced that she has not yet dealt with that she needs to go through. And I think that neither of you are really in a healthy place to be dating each other, let alone other people, without first figuring out your issues and figuring out what these triggers are that are causing you to constantly have these blow-up fights. I would say for you in particular, I would deal with the drinking issue in terms of, you drinking and then feel like you can talk to somebody any way you want to. I think that there are a lot of anger management issues that need to be dealt with in terms of the things that trigger you, in terms of you being not being indifferent enough to various things in a relationship. I think there are some jealousy issues there. I think that you being mad at her for wanting to hang out with her friends is a major issue, because I got news for you. Most women, when they get into a relationship, as much as they like you, are still going to want to have times when they can hang out with their friends without you being there. And I think that if that's an issue for you, you need to look into why that is and get over it. All right. So there's a lot of things here, but ultimately, I don't think that there's any major issues with her in terms of the whole, she hooked up with somebody else when you guys are broken up. You cannot do this thing of, I'm going to break up with you and then think that it's just talk for, well, I'm about to break up with you. Like, that's not a thing. Like, if you're saying to a woman, we're breaking up, that gives her a license to do whatever the heck she wants until you guys get back together. So you thinking you're going to use these breakups as a means to just have a cooling out phase, that's not fair. Now, I've also researched about the fact that for guys in particular, we oftentimes do this thing where we're not great at, in the moment, being able to recognize that the things that we're feeling are just short-term feelings. So what we'll do is this. We'll break up with the girl, and then after about a week or two, we've had time to think about it. We've had time to cool down, and we say, okay, you know what? That wasn't really a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Let me go ahead and get back with her. Okay. And a lot of guys do this in particular because, again, in the moment, we're not getting, if we're in a fight with a woman and we're not getting the time that we feel we need to really like decompress and figure out what it is that's really bugging us, we just figure, well, they're coming at us too intensely, and I need more time to think this out. So the best way to do that is to break up with her, so I had that time to think about some stuff, and then I'll get back to her later, okay? That is a thing that is not fair to women. Women typically, on average, tend to be a little bit better in the moment at being able to manage their feelings or emotions or figure out what it is that's really bugging them. And I think as men, we hear these criticisms and we think to ourselves, oh my God, I'm being attacked. I don't know how to handle this attack. I need time to myself, and so I got to break up with her. And guy, not every criticism is a full-blown attack. So as men, we have to get better at being able to take certain criticisms so we won't just break up with the woman every time she brings something to our attention, okay? As you work on that, you'll find that you actually begin to get better at management of argument situations. And then you actually start to do this weird thing where it's like, if you have the right tools, if you learn to develop the tools and skills to handle arguments and disagreements, then when a fight starts to brew, your first thought, instead of being, oh my God, we're getting into a fight, will be, oh my God, we're going to get into a fight, and I have the tools to actually handle this. I know what questions to ask. I know how to better listen to her. I know what things to listen for. I know how to respond in a way that's going to actually allow my point to be heard. And especially if the woman you're dealing with has those same tools, then an argument can actually be something that you're not going to ever look forward to an argument, but you'll look forward to being able to practice these skills and tools that you've learned to be able to have more effective communication and better growth in your relationship. So learn the tools and skills that you need to effectively handle an argument or a critique, because if you don't, you're going to constantly keep doing this thing where you're in a cycle of break up, get back together, break up, get back together. And the woman you're with may eventually get tired of it and say, this break is the ultimate break, and so I got to be out. All right. And you could be losing out on women that would actually be good for you to be with in a long-term relationship simply because you don't know how to handle yourself when she brings up a criticism. So consider that as well. But hopefully this answers this guy's long question. I hope this has been able to be helpful to you. And as I say, guys, if you have any questions you want me to answer on one of these shows, you can write to me at harrywilmington@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment down below. If you want to support the show, you can go to youtube.com/harrywilmington and become a subscriber. And you can also go to the website, introvertdatingsuccess.com, click on the tip jar tab, and leave a monetary thank you. Okay. We do this show, guys, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8:15 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So be sure to join the show, where you can leave comments during the show and chat. And yeah, that's all I got for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I am Harry Wilmington, and I will catch you guys on the next broadcast. I am out. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Introvert Dating Success Podcast. Visit us at introvertdatingsuccess.com for more great tips on attracting women using your natural introvert charm. Oh, yeah.